Yes, ma'am. Senator Heitkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Vice Chairman Tester. I think once again, here we are, wringing our hands and telling deplorable and horrible stories of situations that should shock the nation's conscience, but somehow don't seem to ever filter out of this hearing room. This is not a new issue. During my time serving as North Dakota's Attorney General, we had a high rate of suicide in Indian country, but it has become almost epidemic. And we cannot simply say, we share your concern. It's not enough any longer for the federal government to say we share the concerns of all the tribal entities and all the tribal families and all the tribal parents who are losing the next generation of their children. We must take action. Now, the unfortunate thing is frequently that action that we must take involves resources. It involves community coming together, having enough resources, having a great plan. And so, Mr. Chairman, where I welcome all of the wonderful witnesses that you have today who are here to talk about an extraordinarily difficult subject, I'm very interested in hearing what successful practices and models Dr. Teresa LaFramboise has to share, because we've got to find a solution. We've got to find best practices, and then we have to fund those best practices. So I want to personally thank Teresa for being here, Dr. LaFramboise for being here. She is of Miami tribal descent and is the proud mother of her daughter, Cecily, who's an enrolled member at the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa located in North Dakota. And I think her expertise and her commitment will be revealed in her testimony, but I think I am particularly anxious to hear what steps we need to take, when we need to take them, and how we change this dynamic. Because what we've done in the past, taking a look at the rapid increases that we've seen, what we've done in the past clearly has not worked. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman. We continue to have my participation and my commitment to work with you and with the Vice Chairman on a path forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think anyone here thinks that suicide is anything other than a symptom of what is clearly conditions that many children on the reservation and in Indian country exist in, creating stress. But last Congress, we held a hearing on trauma-based interventions and had some amazing testimony relative to altered brain chemistry as a result of stress. And I want to address some of this with you, Doctor. Johns Hopkins, who obviously an institution really close here in Washington, the researchers think they have discovered a chemical alteration in a single human gene linked to stress reaction, if confirmed in larger studies, could give doctors a blood test that may tell them who's at risk and who isn't. They believe that this genetic mutation caused as a result of exposure to stress and trauma is a gene known as SKA2. By looking at brain samples from people who had poor mental health and healthy people, the researchers found in that sample from people who had died by suicide levels of SKA2 that were significantly reduced. You go back to the work that's being done in Montana on stress and trauma relative to brain chemistry. And so I think a lot of what we always talk about is treating symptoms of, we're going to do intervention, we're going to build resiliency, when this problem is a systemic-based problem that is driven by trauma and by stress. I'm not a doctor, but I think when you look at these issues, I think you have to come to a clear understanding of what we're dealing with. So how can we integrate some of the new brain chemistry research that we're seeing right now into the programs that you're talking about, Doctor? And how can we do a better job modernizing the way we look at this? Because as the senator from Utah and I know, because we both served as attorneys general, we were talking about this problem in the 90s. We're talking about this problem last decade. We still are talking about this problem, and guess what? It hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse. And so what about a new idea and taking a new look at brain research and what we can do to fashion or to model better intervention programs?
Well, that's a heavy one. Basically, a few things that I would think about. One of the things that, you're talking about basically determining whether a person has experienced this trauma. And so it's also the case with screening, which people are very resistant to. But early screening, we would be able to know a lot about a person to begin with. And having had a child who experienced language learning disabilities, when I was learning about that, I can remember one of the people who was doing the assessment saying, after a certain point, it doesn't matter how it happened or that the fact that it's there, it's now what are you going to do? So yes, we do need to improve assessment and to be able to determine this, to know whether it's there or not.
But I can tell you stories of children who have been involved in anti-suicide programs, been model children who have later committed suicide. So sometimes interventions aren't adequate.
Part of the intervention is also turning that around. You see, in terms of even changing brain chemistry, change the coping aspect of it. I mean, because what are you going to do once you get everybody diagnosed? You have still people that are functioning every day, that are carrying on with their lives, that need to keep going. I hear, when some of my colleagues, and actually the last one that's cited on my testimony by Wexler, there are a number of probably the best researchers that I know of that are in Native American suicide are there, and we struggle with this all the time, because some people will say that they think I'm naive in terms of focusing on these interventions, and they'll say, well, we have to change all the marginalization, the oppression, and all these things. Yes, we do, and we need to treat the people in the meantime. It may take 3 generations, even if we change all these things, for people to be the way, not to have experienced all this. And what do we do with all the people in the meantime that do need help and that are maybe even mildly exposed to trauma and that can benefit from these activities? If I didn't see the individuals and how they function better, I'm not saying
I just have a little bit of time. But if we keep doing what we're doing right now, we do everything the way we've done it, and we're all here in 10 years, do you think we have a better result?
We are not doing enough right now. I'm just highlighting the potential if we were using effective programs. We're not doing that now.
I think we need to modernize effective programs. I think there's been a number of examples, if I can just take a minute, as we look at this and as we look at some of the tribal-based strategies, treating trauma, identifying historic trauma, identifying some of the neurological issues that we have, and being able to, I think, transition some of that new thinking into interventions presents an opportunity, at least when we look at this being done in places like the Menominee, they've been able to double graduation rates. And so I just want to bring a broader kind of new development and new research, I think, into the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.